Okay guys, good morning and welcome to the final instalment of the little series that I've done talking about a number of topics surrounding training, nutrition and things that kind of fall into those categories during lockdown and how and why things are different. So during this third and final video I want to delve into the training side of things a little bit and more specifically kind of look at what expectations you guys should have when looking at progression and what kind of expectations are realistic in terms of looking at how much you can progress at home, setting realistic goals and kind of some general training advice that I think are things that are going to help if you apply them to your at-home training. So first things first, I'm going to talk about the guys that are trying to build muscle at home or at the very least hoping to maintain their muscle at home. It's going to come down to a number of things. Things like how muscular are you, what's your training age, how much equipment do you have access to. The first point being very important in that if you are a 250 pound bloke, mostly muscle, quite a low body fat, a very, very heavily muscle guy, it would have taken quite an effort to build muscle and quite a stimulus to build muscle when you were training in the gym. Realistically, if you've only got a band available to you, it's unlikely that you are going to be able to progress, even going to be able to maintain the amount of muscle you've got. So as with anything, it's always relevant. And again, tying into that, like I said about training age, if you've been training for 10, 15, 20 years in a gym environment and you're very, very advanced in terms of, like I've already mentioned, muscularity, but also strength, if you're somebody who comfortably bench presses 140 kilos for working sets, it's unlikely that you are going to be able to replicate the same stimulus that you need to either grow or maintain your muscle with a light band. It's just not realistic. So that's what I'm talking about when I say setting realistic expectations and looking at what we can do at home. And again, so what equipment do you have access to? Do you have a squat rack? Do you have some barbells, some dumbbells? Do you have a good amount of load that you can apply to the movements that you're doing? Or do you just have your body weight, a light band? Maybe a couple of light dumbbells. That's really, really going to dictate not only how we train, but how realistically we can look to set goals and what kind of goals we can look to set. So I've seen within my own clients, all of my clients are still progressing. And to be honest, none of them fall into that category. None of them are 250 pound men that have been training for 10 to 15 years. But I believe that it's very important to acknowledge that there's been a initial adaptation to a different stimulus when it comes to training. The different stimulus being that we are going, a lot of my clients, I've increased their frequency, and again that's a tool that we can use in order to help us when training at home. If you were doing push-pull legs, it might be worth looking at doing upper lower or doing a full body split. It's not normally something that I would have done, but again it's a new stimulus and it's that increased frequency. If we do have less load and we aren't able to train as intensely as we were, it might make that difference being able to train more frequently, obviously as long as we're managing recovery and as always, as long as we are ensuring that we are training effectively and that we are recovering properly. And I've seen in most of my clients that this adaptation or this growth has mainly occurred in smaller muscle groups, especially the delts and arms, and that's probably because the home exercises that we've got available to us kind of lend themselves to those smaller muscle groups. We don't need as much load. We can create a lot of intensity through supersets, through rest pause sets, through pairing different exercises from a mechanical standpoint, like I did in my last video, using partials and things like that to extend the set, do lend themselves to delts and arms. It's quite difficult to train the chest and the back effectively it's quite difficult to train the chest and the back effectively without load, just because simply they're just bigger muscle groups. They can move more weight than your delts and arms can. You know, you could bench press a lot more than you could tricep push down. It's just common sense. But how long is that going to last for? How long is that initial adaptation going to last for? More than likely, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it's always going to be individual. I could have two different individuals doing the exact same protocol and they would respond differently. It's more than likely not going to last forever, or to be honest, not for a long period of time, because there isn't that element of progressive overload. And that's kind of what I've seen is lacking at the moment in home training, is that element of progressive overload, because there's that lack of load present. But I'm still getting my clients, no matter how trivial it feels to logbook that they're using the same band every time, but they're increasing the number of reps, I'm still getting them to logbook, because if we can track some form of progressive overload, it's going to make sure that we are still progressing in the gym or at home now. And to touch on progressive overload, if you look into the literature surrounding hypertrophy, it's quite common knowledge that in terms of training intensity, we need to train somewhere near to failure in order to elicit a good hypertrophic response. Allegedly, the literature isn't the only thing to go off of. We need anecdotal evidence as well, or experience. But allegedly, if we take a set to failure and we hit failure at 6 with a heavier load, or we take a set to failure and we hit failure at 30, within that 6 to 30 rep range, there isn't going to be much difference in terms of the response that we get from the muscle, as far as growth and as far as hypertrophy. So if you were incline dumbbell pressing the 30s for a top set of 6, when you were at the gym at the Rochester Health Club, and now you're incline dumbbell pressing the 15s because it's all you've got, if you can use things like tempo to your advantage and you can hit muscular failure at 20, say 22 reps, allegedly the response to the muscle is going to be the same. There will be no difference in terms of hypertrophy. So obviously in terms of strength progression, there's going to be a difference. You know, you're kind of capped out in terms of what you can do in terms of strength progression. But if we can elicit that same hypertrophy, I can't say the word hypertrophy, if we can elicit the same hypertrophic response, there we go, I got there in the end, then we can do that by taking a set to failure at a higher rep range, because we just haven't got the load in order to hit failure in that lower rep range. And in terms of the kind of training that I'm talking about, more bodybuilding style resistance training, it's going to depend as well, how consistent were you before training at home? Were you nailing every single variable that we have that we can control? Your training, nutrition, sleep, recovery goes hand in hand with sleep, supplementation being lower down on that pecking order, but it still plays a role. Were you absolutely nailing every variable that we've got available to us, or were you training infrequently, sometimes not effectively? Was your nutrition all over the place? Reason why I'm saying this is, if you were nailing every variable, then obviously it's going to be more difficult, because there is going to be a change in stimulus and a change in what you are doing. If you weren't nailing every variable, now is the time, because I've seen in clients before, clients who come to me and I simply get them nailing their training, nutrition, sleep, recovery, supplementation, and we start with the basics. We work up to that, but there is generally a pretty quick and responsive adaptation to that, because their body's just not been doing that, and it really will fast track what you're doing. So if you've not been nailing every variable and you start to, I do believe that you will continue to progress at home, even with less equipment, and just the fact that you are training more consistently and you're giving your muscles a stimulus more consistently, more regularly, giving it the nutrients it needs, the sleep, the recovery. I do believe that you will be able to progress if you weren't doing that already. Okay, that's it from me, guys. I really hope that you found these little talking videos useful. I will try to get more things like this out in the future if there is a good response and you guys want to see them. As always, my DMs are always open. If you guys want to ask me a question on anything, I will always be more than happy to help. Okay, guys, thank you.